I'm Travis O'Quinn, and I'm at Kansas State University, and I'm in the Meat Science Research Group here. And the purpose of our research group, the major focus that we have, is looking at all the factors that affect meat palatability, anything that controls tenderness, juiciness, flavor, how those interact to create a great beef steak eating experience. That's what we're interested in researching. The paper that we're talking about was in collaboration with two collaborators from Texas Tech University, Dr. Mark Miller and Dr. Chance Brooks. The major focus of this study and the question we were trying to address is how is palatability of beef tenderloin steaks affected with different marbling levels and cooked to different degrees of doneness. Certainly with today's beef herd being smaller than it has been since the 1960s and record beef prices, the need for food service institutions and restaurants to keep down the cost per plate is higher than ever. Additionally, beef tenderloins are the most valuable cut in the entire beef carcass, and moreover, the premium charge for USDA Choice tenderloins over Select is higher than any other premium in the entire beef carcass. We wanted to be able to determine if that premium was actually justified, or if there was no difference, then it's probably not advantageous for retailers and food service institutions to be paying premium dollars for USDA Choice tenderloins over Select tenderloins. This is certainly something that's been studied in many other muscles. The longissimus muscle, which is the major muscle running down the back of the animal. We know that marbling plays a large role in the palatability of those steaks. Muscles from the chuck, muscles from the round and the sirloin. We've studied the effect of marbling on all of those different cuts. However, beef tenderloins to date have been very little research conducted on them. We don't really understand how palatability is affected by marbling within that particular cut. For this study, what we did was we selected beef tenderloin steaks of two quality grades, USDA Choice and USDA Select. And additionally, we had a third quality grade. It was a premium select quality grade, a USDA High Select treatment that we used to try and determine if a source select product that only represented the top half of the USDA Select grade would eat more consistently than a commodity select grade, which would be the entire cross-section of the grade. We were able to secure these steaks from a meat processor, and they shipped them directly to us. They were aged around 21 days. They were fresh, never frozen product. For this study, for the sensory testing, we did a few things that were a little bit different than what we would typically do in sensory testing. What we did is we actually screened consumers for their preferred degree of doneness. One of the big questions that we wanted to answer in this study was, does degree of doneness affect the palatability of tenderloin steaks? We know from past research that consumers are very particular about their preferred degree of beef doneness. And so in order to eliminate any discrimination of the product based on degree of doneness, we asked consumers before they came and ate on the panels what their preferred degree of doneness was. This allowed us to only feed consumers their preferred degree of doneness, which really did help those consumers evaluate the product without discriminating against the product for being outside of their preferred degree of doneness. Additionally, when we cooked the samples, we actually added a seasoning blend to the steaks. Many times in sensory work like this, we would not add a seasoning blend. We would just allow the beef to have the natural beef flavor associated with the product. But one of the major objectives of this study was to be able to relate it back to food service. And almost entirely all steaks served in restaurants or in homes are seasoned. And we want to do the best job that we could to actually replicate that. We were able to verify the degrees of doneness after cooking by comparison to the beef steak color guide that's published by NCBA. Because of that, we ended up with 3 very nice degrees of doneness that were very consistent by the culinary professionals, the cooks. We had a very rare degree of doneness, a medium rare degree of doneness, and a well done degree of doneness. And what we did is after those steaks were cooked, we actually divided that steak into 3 equally sized pieces, which ended up being a third of the size of a tenderloin steak, so it was a very good sized sample, and we served them directly to the consumers. The consumers, again, were recruited from the communities around Lubbock, Texas, and we paid them to come and participate in the study. They really did seem to enjoy it. It represented a cross-section of the beef consuming population. We fed them 1 steak that was a warm-up sample so they could become familiar with the testing procedures, and then 3 steaks, one from each of the different degrees, or one from each of the different quality grades that we were evaluating. We asked those consumers to evaluate those steaks on an 8-point scale for tenderness, juiciness, flavor, and overall liking. Additionally, we asked the consumers to rate each of those palatability traits as whether it was acceptable or unacceptable. And for traits that were rated as unacceptable, we asked the consumers to give us a reason as to why they stated that sample was unacceptable. We also provided the consumers some water, crackers, and apple juice to serve as a palate cleanser between the different samples, especially with the seasoning. It was very important that we did that. The primary findings from this study were that when we looked at quality grade, there was no interaction between degree and doneness, indicating that the palatability traits that we saw for each quality grade were similar across all degrees of doneness. And what we found was that USDA Choice and Select and our High Select product, there was no difference for any of the palatability traits we evaluated. And additionally, the average rating for each of those traits on our 8-point scale was above a 7, indicating that corresponded with a rating of like very much, giving us clear indication that the consumers really did prefer the samples regardless of quality grade for each of the different palatability traits. What we found from a degree of doneness standpoint was that the well done samples rated a little bit tougher and drier than samples that were cooked to a lower degree of doneness. However, what was very interesting to us from a degree of doneness standpoint is that consumers who rated the well done samples as lower for tenderness and juiciness, they rated overall like exactly the same as the consumers on the lower degrees of doneness. This really did give us some evidence that perhaps consumers who prefer well done samples, because the consumers were screened for their degree of doneness preference, that flavor may be a bigger driver of overall palatability perception in that group of consumers. Other studies have indicated this, but this study really does a good job of demonstrating that flavor may perhaps be a bigger driver for overall eating satisfaction of consumers who prefer well-done degrees of doneness. The results of this study will really benefit the food processing industry and consumers because it gives a clear indication that paying premium dollars for choice tenderloin steaks over select tenderloin steaks was not advantageous. There is no palatability-based justification for the premium marketing of these choice tenderloins over select tenderloins. So it does give confidence to consumers or food service establishments that they may be able to find a way to cut their budget, to reduce plate costs from a food service standpoint, to purchase a lower quality grading USDA Select tenderloin instead of a USDA Choice tenderloin, and be able to actually save those dollars, especially with such high premiums on USDA Choice tenderloins over Select, as well as the high beef prices that we currently face.